We now have the three components of the aggregate supply, aggregate demand model. We have the long run aggregate supply curve, the short run aggregate supply curve, and the aggregate demand curve. And we can combine these together to find the overall macro equilibrium within our economy. So when we combine these curves together on this graph, it helps us depict the macroeconomy, the realities of where we are on the standardized business cycle, and it helps us think about what could be done, if anything, in response to the conditions that we face. The economy's current equilibrium is wherever the short-run aggregate supply curve crosses the aggregate demand curve. We'd like, as this picture shows, we'd like for this to be right where the long-run aggregate supply curve is. If the cross of the short-run aggregate supply curve and the aggregate demand curve is on the long-run aggregate supply curve, we have the long-run equilibrium of y equals c plus I plus g plus nx. Well, where does this come from? Remember, y, our maximum sustainable output, can be thought of as derived from our production possibilities frontier, or our output on the solo growth model. The long-run aggregate supply curve is our benchmark output y. And also, c plus I plus g plus nx. That is equal to aggregate demand. Thus, if all three lines cross, our c plus I plus g plus nx, aggregate demand, is going to be equal to our y from our long-run aggregate supply curve. The long-run aggregate supply curve is our benchmark. But we can stray from the long-run equilibrium in the short run. If the short-run aggregate supply and the aggregate demand curve cross to the left of the long-run aggregate supply, the economy is sputtering and producing below its potential output. It's equivalent to being at some point on the trough in our business cycle. If the short-run aggregate supply and the aggregate demand curves cross at a point to the right of the long-run aggregate supply curve, the economy is booming and producing above potential output. Now, this may seem great, but economists have reasons to worry about this outcome, and we can think of the economy as overheating in this situation. Output is high, unemployment is low, but this is not sustainable. This isn't necessarily a good thing. In this situation, we are on a part of the peak on the business cycle. We're above the trend line. All right, so this was our equilibrium in our aggregate supply, aggregate demand model. Up next, we're going to see how we ever get out of or get back into equilibrium by seeing how the aggregate supply and aggregate demand curves shift around.